What's good? It's your boy Fanon. Finally get to a subject that I hadn't had time in the last couple days to talk about, and that is Danny Garcia acting like he wants to get with Errol Spence Jr. to unify if he beats Sean Porter when they fight for the WBC after they fight for the WBC title. And he also said he talked about Keith Thurman because the WBC had ordered the fight between Sean Porter and Danny Garcia, but they were ordered, I guess, when Keith Thurman is ready to fight, then that whoever wins that fight is supposed to fight Keith Thurman. But it seemed as if when Danny Garcia was speaking about it, that he thought that could be 2 years off, depending on whenever Keith Thurman was coming back. And also Danny Garcia talked about the fact that he had, that it's about legacy, and talked about moving up to 154 pounds after he beats Errol Spence Jr., who he compared to Lucas Matthyssee. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to be doing a live stream later today. I certainly hope that you guys who aren't already subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of the live streams and you can participate in the live streams. Subscribe and hit the bell icon is free, man. And the conversations are good, so I certainly hope you'd accept my invitation. We got a lot of good boxing fans, a couple hundred people that come on a regular basis, and it really is very, very good conversations. We also have other guests that come onto the panel who are other content providers on YouTube, so you get to hear a lot of different good perspectives. Now that said, thank you to everybody that donated through in the live stream, the super chat and the Venmo, and also Patreons. We're really doing very well with this, with raising money to support these young athletes in the city and state that I'm in, and your help is so very much appreciated. Also, when you guys watch the videos, and I know I put the ads out there, but when you guys watch it, that goes to helps the support as well, and it's doing really well. So I very, very much appreciate you, and I'd also hope that you guys could come attend the live stream. Now, the welterweight division is, in my opinion, it's my second favorite division to the heavyweight division as a boxing fan. I think the heavyweight division is it's the king of boxing right there. It's just the king of boxing. But then after that, the welterweight division for me, probably because of the number of great fighters that have come through there. And, because you have a lot of very good lightweights. You have good lightweights, good junior welterweights that move up into the welterweight division. You also have some slightly undersized 154 pounders that fight in that division. So, and it's the division of Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran moved up there from lightweight. You have, Sugar Ray Robinson. You just have a lot of Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Tito Trinidad, a lot of just really Floyd Mayweather Jr. eventually moved up to welterweight. So it really is. It's the second money division in boxing. And right now, I think it's got some of the best talent in boxing at the top of that division in Errol Spence Jr., Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Terrence Crawford moved into the division. Jeff Horn, I think, is a very underrated commodity at 147 pounds. And like I said, I really want very much to move the boxing in a direction. I wish that boxing can move into a direction where the real goal is to be a unified champion and to put real pressure on fighters and the boxing media, the middlemen in there, to push towards having one single champion in a division so that so you can point and say, that's the man. Right? Yeah, those guys have have a belt, they got a, shiny belt around their shoulder and they're calling themselves a champion, but we all know that that's not the real champion. The real champion is this guy at this weight class. Like, for the very brief moment that Terrence Crawford had that at 140, you knew who the guy was. Also, when boxing was the strongest in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, it always, you knew who the champion was. And also, there was a lot more, when you only had one champion, there was also a lot more stock in being the number one contender, right? The number two contender. Right? You're the number one, number two guy. That really meant something because there was only one champion, right? So seeing Mikey Garcia, excuse me, seeing Danny Garcia fight Sean Porter, in my mind, elevates, and they become the WBC champion. That elevates it to me into like what would have historically been a number one or number two contender spot. Similar to Terrence Crawford beating Jeff Horn or Jeff Horn winning. Those guys are all in my mind, they're all contenders to be the man in that division. Because even Errol, Spence, nobody can say that they've beaten everybody and that they are the champion. And it's only when you have unification that somebody can say that, right? And I mean not unifying like two of the belts. I mean unifying all four of the belts. And let's please not add any more belts to the equation to add even more confusion to that. People talk about solving the problem of boxing and making boxing exciting again and all that. But when you have a limited number of champions, when you only have one champion, right? And I don't know how many champions there are in the major four. I think something like over 60 current reigning champions. That waters down the value of every single solitary championship belt, because there are so many champions. But with Danny Garcia fighting Sean Porter and moving on to fight Errol Spence Jr., it would take one person out of contender status, right? By unifying the IBF and the WBC belt. And then of course you have the WBA, but you have the WBO. And after the Terrence Crawford versus Jeff Horn fight, right? That's going to eliminate another contender. And you'll have a champion, and hopefully that champion, Terrence Crawford, can then can unify the WBO. We'll fight to unify the WBO, the WBA, and the WBC belt. So the way that when Danny Garcia talks about that, and I liked how I sounded, man. I know people talk about cherry picking Danny Garcia because of the Raj Salka fact that a lot of people thought he lost to Mauricio Herrera, the last fight with Brandon Rios, but to his credit, he has fought Lucas Matthysse. He did fight Lamont Peterson. He did fight Keith Thurman. He has shown that he's willing to get in there with guys that are, top-notch fighters. So it's not like he's just, he's not some situation where, even like a Adonis Stevenson, where it's years and years and years go by before he fights a top-level guy, and he really does kind of seem like he's sitting on his belt, right? Like in the case of Adonis Stevenson. Adonis Stevenson didn't fight Andre Ward. He didn't fight Sergey Kovalev. And those are the two guys that, who are light heavyweight champions. Who are light heavyweight champions, where people were kind of wondering what he was doing. I think he might even got his WBC belt off of Chad Dawson, and Chad Dawson was coming off of a knockout loss, right? So, I mean, that's just one of the things, like, where I think that's a fair criticism of Adonis Stevenson. I don't think that tells the whole story on Adonis Stevenson, but I do think it's a fair criticism, or a reasonable criticism, one that can be supported. But Danny Garcia, he's a selective cherry picker, but he will try to hit it out the park, pretty much every other fight. But now with him and the fight with him and Sean Porter, one of the things that he said about Sean Porter was, he's like, if you try that head button with me, it ain't gonna work, right? You got to work out for with his head. And I'm surprised to see how many people, because I've been on some live streams with some cats and checking out the predictions of the fights, that just on the and not just because the people who I'm on these panels with, these guys are very good at predicting fights, man. Very, very good at predicting fights. They're consistently, not every one, but very solid opinions on it, man. Like the Boxing Clinic and more. Shout out to my man, the Boxing Clinic and more. You ain't subscribe to his channel. Definitely check his channel out. He's predicting uh Danny Garcia beating Sean Porter. Several other dudes are predicting that and predicting it by a knockout. So now I do think that when you can, and I'm favoring Danny Garcia in that fight. I don't think that it's definitely not a lock in my opinion, right? For him to win that fight, but um, I think that he does have a, I think he does have a very very solid chance of winning that. Now against Errol Spence Jr., that Lucas Matthysse thing, I think what I'm hoping he meant was that he has fought big boogeymen before, right? Because he says that people are saying that Errol Spence Jr. is the boogeyman. He's had two title defenses. How can you be the boogeyman with two title defenses? I mean, at 147, Danny Garcia, man, you did not successfully defend your belt not once, and you're a quality fighter. So, you know, let fair be fair. But I think it's fair to say that Errol Spence Jr. is the boogeyman at 147 pounds. Because his people act like they don't want to fight him. Keith Thurman, who was the top welterweight, looked like he would do anything possible not to fight him. Sean Porter isn't even going for didn't even try to go for the IBF belt to try to fight him, and stuck over there by the WBC, even the WBC belt, trying to go for the WBC belt, even though he was the former IBF champion. And the way that Errol Spence Jr., the way that I think this is causing this dude to be the boogeyman is, he went over there to beat Sean. He went to the UK to beat Kell Brook. And there's a very good argument that Kell Brook was the best welterweight that there was. I think Kell Brook had an easier time with Sean Porter than Keith Thurman did. And I think it's just an argument. And at that stage, the best welterweight was either Kell Brook. It was either Kell Brook or it was Keith Thurman. But I don't think at that time that Keith Thurman had really set himself apart as being a significantly better fighter than Kell Brook. And to me, a Keith Thurman-Kell Brook fight is a 50-50 proposition. And as it turned out, Errol Spence took a huge... He went to a situation where everything was against him except for his skills in the ring. Went in there to an area where he needed to get a knockout to win and beat the brakes off of Kell Brook. Overcame a highly, highly skilled fighter and took him down in devastating fashion. And then stopped a guy that beat Danny Garcia. And that I think I would have scored the fight in favor of Lamont Peterson over Danny Garcia. So to me, Danny Garcia and Lamont Peterson, pretty much they're about what and what. They're about what and what skill wise, really. The way that I see it, and I know that the circle logic doesn't work. Where Lamont Peterson got knocked out by. Actually, that proves that circle logic doesn't work. Triangular logic doesn't work because Lucas Matthysse knocked out Lamont Peterson, and then Danny Garcia beat Lucas Matthysse, right? So, and then it was a very very close fight between Danny Garcia and Lamont Peterson. I would have scored for Lamont Peterson, but he just showed a lot about the difficulties that when he started really stepping to Danny Garcia, I think he beat him, boxing and stepping to him, in my opinion. But, the fight turned out it was scored the way that it was scored. But against Errol Spence Jr., I think that's a stoppage, man. I think it's a stoppage. Somewhere 7-8 rounds. I think there's just too big. I think that there's a gap in skill. I think there's a gap in size. I think there's a gap in strength. I think there's a gap in punching power. And of course, Danny Garcia, Danny Garcia does have a very, very nice Joe Frazier'ish, Philly fighter type left hook. But I don't really know if that's going to work with a south as well with a southpaw who's got their jab out in front where that hook is coming from. And on top of it, I just keep hearing, and I'm believing that it's true that there's a lot more wrinkles to Errol Spence Jr.'s game than what he's showing, because just with just with plan A, he's destroying cats. But he did show some wrinkles and some things when it was clear that Lamont Peterson wasn't going to survive that fight, and he really picked up the pace on him. Man, that dude, for those brief especially when he switched orthodox, right? Came out of the high guard to a different defensive guard. He really showed me something in that Lamont Peterson fight. Now in his second defense, we'll see what goes on with Centino. I think Centino is a significantly lower level of opposition than Lamont Peterson. Definitely a lot lower level of opposition than Kell Brook was. So I expect to see another fantastic show out of him. But the big fight though, the two big fights right now that are lined up for the welterweight division are Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, and Terrence Crawford and Jeff Horn. And if Terrence Crawford beats Jeff Horn, which I think he will, but it isn't promised, man. I'm telling you, it's not promised. Jeff Horn is a very big, very rugged, unorthodox welterweight. Guy should probably be fighting at 154 pounds. And you have a guy moving up in weight, and he's also not scared of the big stage, Jeff Horn. Now the disadvantage that Jeff Horn has against Terrence Crawford is this is the first time he's fighting in the States. He's going to be fighting against a guy that, unlike Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford's not asleep on it. Terrence Crawford has watched him fight, I'm sure, at least the last two fights, real time, and has a game plan for him. I think that Terrence Crawford also has something that, in my opinion, is very underrated in boxing, which is a corner. I think that Jeff Horn had an advantage over Manny Pacquiao in his corner. I have never really seen Freddie Roach make anybody better. I think, and I guess it's going to come off of criticism, but I just don't. I haven't seen him. I think that he's I think he's like, an in-house trainer, a celebrity trainer. I think he made his name. I didn't see great amount of improvement in Manny Pacquiao throughout his career. And I've never really seen him his whole approach. And, this is obviously me being an amateur observer, Monday morning quarterback, and a guy that's professional, but I don't see Freddie Roach as being the level of trainer or having the level of camp that Robert Garcia has. And Robert Garcia has, with Robert Garcia's father, the training camps those guys have. And I don't see him having the level of trainer that Terrence Crawford has in Brian McIntyre. So going into the Terrence Crawford Jeff Horn fight, I think that one of the biggest advantages that Terrence Crawford has is the corner. Right now, Glenn Rushton seems to me to be a very bright guy. He definitely playing games with that with the horsehair talk about, hey, if you're gonna fight with horsehair gloves, we're gonna fight with horsehair gloves, and and Brian McIntyre said, man, we don't cheat. We're not gonna use those gloves. So, I don't know if he was trying to prevent Terrence Crawford from doing that or whatever, but that is a good side of Glenn Rushton. He's definitely trying to play some mind games there. But anyway, when it's all said and done, man, it's looking like, provided we don't have issues with promoters holding fights up, which you don't have with the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF. You don't have any promoters holding that up. You had a fighter holding it up, in Keith Thurman. But if Keith Thurman ever wanted, to come off vacation, get serious about it, there's no network issue standing in the way. There's no promotional issue standing in the way. It's just whether or not the fighters want to fight each other. And that is the best type of, if there's going to be a holdup, from making big fights happen, let it be that type of holdup. One fighter doesn't want to fight another fighter, and hey, man, you can point the finger directly at that fighter, right? And because that fighter, the only person that fighter can keep from fighting is himself, right? The only way that Keith Thurman can hold up a fight is by saying he doesn't want to fight, right? But when you have a promoter like Bob Arum can prevent 6, 7, 8 different fights from happening. Networks can prevent a whole bunch of fights from happening. And those are the type of holdups that I wish would go away. But I like, again, that Danny Garcia is saying, I want to fight Sean Porter. And when I beat Sean Porter, then I'm going to go and beat Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. isn't the big boogeyman. Now, when he's talking about moving up to 154, I don't know, Danny. But if he does, hey, man, that shows greatness. And that's another cat, man, that I would say when we do these pound for pound lists, I used to have Danny Garcia, pretty high in my pound for pound. And honestly, the next time somebody asks me a question, I probably need to throw him back in there, man, because he really has had some very, very good fights. He has a loss, but the loss is against Keith Thurman, who's also somebody who's a terrific fighter. So anyway, it is what it is. I appreciate Danny Garcia acting like he wants it. I hope that this fight really happens and it's not, and it's not just a bunch of talk. Then I definitely hope that he gets that smoke with Errol Spence. But at that point in time, that's just going to be done because he ain't getting past Errol Spence, if you ask me. And then if Terrence Crawford jumps in there, or even if it's Jeff Horn that wins and they get in that mix, and we can start seeing unification in 147 pounds. And that's what I'd like to see most. And with that, I'm out.